The ANC will pay back the money. This is for costs incurred in ferrying the party's delegation to Zimbabwe on an Air Force jet. The delegation visited that country to meet members of ZANU-PF. On Friday, President Cyril Ramaphosa gave Defence Minister Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula 48 hours to give him a full report. The presidency has confirmed it's received the report, but the DA wants that report to be made public so it can be scrutinized by South Africans and Parliament. For more on this, we're joined by ENCA's political editor, Vuyo Mvoko. Vuyo, good afternoon to you. It's funny, when you go through the statement, it's got the details of what happened at that meeting with ZANU-PF, a statement that, by the way, the ANC had sent last week. So they go into those details, and then they hide this there at the end and say, oh, finally, we're willing to reimburse the state for ferrying our officials. What did you make of that?
Well, buried right at the end, a couple of lines at that, Clement, a bit disingenuous, it must be said, of the governing party, and it doesn't put or shouldn't put the matter to rest. It's one thing, of course, to accept or to finally accept that you were in the wrong on so many counts. First of all, I mean, all of us have had to abide by the regulations of the National Disaster Act. We've had to live lives that ideally we don't want to live, but we had to comply for the safety of everybody. Why should ANC leaders be an exception? And secondly, I mean, you are using taxpayers' money for party political trip. You know, there was a serious blurring of lines between the party and the state, and questions have been raised, and those questions still need answers, notwithstanding the two lines that are buried in that statement. At the end of it all, if you read through the lines, between the lines, I should say, there is very little to show for that trip even. So on all counts, really, the ANC was on the wrong here, and what they have done is actually inexcusable. Our eyes should shift to President Cyril Ramaphosa to see what he's going to do with the member of his executive who clearly breached the rules and protocols. She must be called to account over and above his party, of course, having to pay back the money.
And I mean, let me read just the line that is buried there in the last paragraph, where it says, we traveled in an unusual manner and profusely humble ourselves where we went wrong during the lockdown, and will reimburse government for the costs incurred on behalf of our delegation. The reality here, as you say, there are so many questions, and this doesn't put the matter to rest. The reality here is the defense minister usually also travels in a specific airplane, in a specific jet that would maybe take about 8-9 people. But this time around, she had chosen a big enough jet, which the Falcon 900, my understanding, which the suggestion that makes is that this was probably even pre-planned from the beginning, that this was going to be the case. So it doesn't really put the matter to rest, because the ANC still doesn't say and take full responsibility and accountability.
Indeed. I mean, where did she get the, authority to do what she did? So she must be called to account. The ANC too, I mean, the audacity to travel on a, government, funded or financed flight or arrangement to go to Harare and come back with actually nothing to show for it. Read that statement again from the start, Clement, if you will. There is very little to give, if anything, to give anyone any confidence that the meeting was worth it at all. So there's lots of questions, and as you're saying, those questions remain unanswered. The ball is now in President Cyril Ramaphosa's court to call to account the defense minister. But also Parliament has a role to play here. They need to come out, the ruling party in particular, and actually defend defend their own independence and say, we're calling on the members of the president and the members of the executive involved to explain, not only explain to us, but to actually, ensure that something is being done about those people who are found to have breached the rules and protocols.
Yeah. What about the focus on the president himself, Vuyo? This statement was sent out by the collective leadership of the ANC. It's not Ace Magashule alone. This is what the ANC is communicating to South Africans. And questions have been raised about, is it even possible that President Cyril Ramaphosa didn't know that, the ANC delegation was going to join the defense minister, when he approved that trip to Zimbabwe, and he sees that there's a bigger jet that is being used. When he sat in those NEC meetings and they're talking about the travel arrangements, I mean, it's impossible that he didn't know. So what focus must we also put on him to account and not act as if he's surprised and asking for reports as if he didn't know?
Well, you're part of that briefing. Clement, he's the one who told us that the ANC was going to go to Zimbabwe. So he knew very well that this was going to happen. In fact, he is among the people who actually took a decision. I remember, even saying, what the president was telling us at the time was the same thing that Ace Magashule had told me a month before. So they had been dragging their feet on the matter, and he said that was exactly what they were trying to do, to move with speed in dealing with that matter. So how then did he think these people were going to travel to Zimbabwe? Who was going to pay for it? Where were they going to get the permission to land? Even if, for argument's sake, let's say they had chartered their own flight. How were they going to ensure that the regulations that are still in place are in fact adhered to? So lots of questions to be posed to him. As well, over and above them being guardians of, the taxpayers' money, and having to ensure that it doesn't get abused by whoever may be powerful or more powerful than most of us. So he too, indeed, has lots of questions to answer.
Yeah, and some of the questions that he's possibly, answering this afternoon is at the NEDLEC meeting, Vuyo, and the irony of it all that we're talking about the ANC delegation that may have possibly abused state resources, but the president right now, together with some of his cabinet ministers, is having a meeting at NEDLEC. They're discussing that economic recovery plan. That meeting currently underway this afternoon.
It's supposed to start at 3 o'clock, I'm told, and on the agenda is, of course, the economic recovery plan that he has been talking about for a good couple of months now. Lots of frustration from business and labor in particular. I'm told not a great deal of movement. There was a meeting last night where the social partners, labor, business, and a civil society were trying to find some common ground so that when they get into this meeting with the government, at least a lot of differences will have been ironed out between and among themselves. Whether they have succeeded in doing that is, of course, another matter. Among the key things that are on the table, Clement, is the issue of Eskom. Eskom's problems are there, and we are told they are going to continue for a very long time. Apparently, there's a proposal on the table for there to be a pact between these four groupings: government, civil society, labor, and business, about what needs to happen next to deal with what we have seen over the past few weeks, the load shedding that is, but also over the next few months and a couple of years, what needs to be put in place to ensure that the security of our electricity is not compromised further. But there are other issues that include the role of state-owned enterprises and the involvement of the private sector and what that may involve, given the ANC's sort of a bit of an ambiguous position around how and whether to involve the private sector in state-owned enterprises. So all those things are on the table. That meeting scheduled to start at 3 o'clock.
All right. Vuyo, thank you so much for your time. Let's